So, welcome to our Presenter Academy, Tony.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have such a legend here and to be speaking with you today. What would you say, as a question here to kick off with, when you started in radio, how different would it be to someone who's looking at this on the Presenter Academy today and thinking, I'd like to start in radio now in 2012?
I think it's different because you've got so many different radio stations to choose from now, whereas when I wanted to break into it, there was only pirate radio and the BBC. And the BBC tend to have people who are a lot older, and you had to have experience. And there was Radio Luxembourg, but there were very few DJs around, whereas now there are hundreds of us, all desperate to try and get work. So it was more difficult in those days, I think, probably to get a job than it is now. Except, of course, that in commercial radio, the market's dropped slightly, and there isn't the money around that there used to be because the commercials are going elsewhere.
What would you say is the reason for that? I mean, obviously the internet is partly to blame, I would think, and people spending their money in different places. I mean, does that affect a presenter these days, thinking that I do want to do this job, but it may not pay enough, and I may have to take a job as a window cleaner as well?
Yeah, I think the problem has been that they've just licensed too many radio stations. I mean, in America there's hundreds of them there, but it's a bigger country and there are more people. And I think the basic reason for all the problems that commercial radio particularly have is the fact that the authorities just allowed so many to suddenly come on stream, and there wasn't really enough people to go around. It's as simple as that.
When you started out in radio it must have been the Pirates before Radio 1 in 1967. What was the year you started, 65 or 64?
1964, July the 25th, 1964, with Ragdoll by the Four Seasons out on the North Sea, Radio Caroline South, on a program called The Big Lineup, which went on between 4 and 6.
Okay, so everybody remembers the first record they played on the radio. I mean, I remember your first record on Radio 1 being Flowers in the Rain, but I didn't know your first actual record on the radio, so it's quite good to hear that here. A bit of an exclusive.
Yeah, Ragdoll, the Four Seasons. And I met Frankie Valli fairly recently at BBC Radio 2. He'd just been doing an interview there, and I told him the fact that his record was the first record I ever played, and he couldn't have given a damn.
Well, he has no idea what fine company he's in. And of course, he's kind of back in fashion now with the Jersey Boys show, isn't he? They're going to make it into a movie as well.
Fabulous show, and it'll make a great movie. I've seen the show about 3 times. Love it.
Yes,
yeah.
So
I love it more than I love Frankie Valli. It was a great disappointment. It's always a disappointment when you played somebody's records a lot, and you think, I'm really looking forward to meeting this guy, and he's only a little fella. He's even smaller than I am. And I felt like kicking him out of the door. It was probably, I put it down to the fact that it was not a good day for him.
Okay. Here's some information then for people watching Presenter Academy. My first record, which was ironically on Radio 1, strange place to start, as you know, it's been downhill since then, was, I don't think I'm going to ever meet these girls, Toto Coelho and I Eat Cannibals.
Even if I met them, I wouldn't recognize them. And I don't even remember that record, to be honest.
Oh, come on, it's I Eat Cannibals. Yeah, okay. So anyway, so you're on the pirate ship, and is this Radio London or Radio Caroline?
This is Radio Caroline originally. There were 2 ships originally. There was Radio Atlanta and Radio Caroline. I joined it about 3 months after it started, and Radio Atlanta and Radio Caroline, they were side by side off the coast of Frinton. And then they linked up, and Radio Caroline sailed to the north, and Radio Atlanta became Radio Caroline. And that's when I joined it.
Okay, so you're on the ship. Is it anything like people have seen the young kid arriving when he arrived on the boat that rocked and it came out of the mist and there was the ship? Or is that just a fallacy?
Well, for me, it was rather like that. Yes, it was. We sailed from Harwich. We used to get under Harwich and then get onto a little tender boat, and it would take us out. On the day that I went out, it was quite a nice day, and I just remember seeing it coming out of the distance and then getting on board. Although the ship itself in the film looked pretty good and the inside was great, the film itself didn't really bear much resemblance to the pirate ship. If it had been like that, we'd all still be out there.
Yes, because there was at least 5,000 girls turning up every 2 weeks.
There were no girls on board the ship, except there was a girl called Maureen Blackburn who was in the library at Radio Caroline. No relation to mine, but she was the only girl on board. And but apart from that, we didn't have all those parties. We didn't have drink and drugs and things like that, because being in the North Sea, it's quite a dangerous place to be. We were allowed 2 bottles of lager, I think it was, a day. And I don't smoke, but you were issued with 200 cigarettes when you got on board, because we were there for 2 weeks on and a week off. So that was it, really. But there were no parties or anything like that, although it was great fun. We had a good time.
Who did you give your cigarettes to then?
I can't remember. I just gave them to anybody who wanted them, really. But most of them were smokers in those days, because we didn't realise the harm it was doing. But I just never got into it, smoking.
Good for you, me neither. Who's the most, I suppose, not just famous, but somebody we would know and people watching this would know, who also became a good pal for you on the first ship?
On the first ship, I was on with Dave Lee Travis, DLT. The next ship I went to, actually, I made more friends because there was Norman St. John, who I still keep in touch with. And,
in Australia, yes?
Yes, he's in Australia, but he comes over to this country now and then. We go out for lunch. He normally comes over every 1 or 2 years or so, and he's not in the business anymore. He actually he sells wire, believe it or not, wire fencing and things like that. But he's a lovely guy, and we still keep in touch. But I think probably when I moved to Radio London, Big L Radio London, which was my favourite station, then people like Dave Cash and Kenny Everett and people like that were the ones that I really was, admire very much.
Okay. So you're on this boat, and it's a life that you've chosen because you planned originally, or were looking to be a singer, weren't you?
Well, I was a singer before a DJ. I started out, I was at college. I've got a diploma in business, although I keep that quiet because people might think I'm intelligent. So I've got an HND, a National Diploma in Business, which I got in Bournemouth. But at the same time as doing that, I was a guitarist and singer with a dance band in Bournemouth at the Bournemouth Pavilion Ballrooms, Gian Ralphini in the orchestra. And I had a breakaway group in that, and we used to sing and do all the current songs, the Elvis Presleys and the Beatles of the day. One of the guys in there, not many people remember him probably, Zoot Money. He was a guitarist of mine, and Al Stewart, who did The Year of the Cat.
Oh, I know him.
He was my lead guitarist.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing! I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was the lead guitarist. Al, of course, I think he keeps it quiet now because he's quite successful. And in fact, I haven't seen him for years.
I like some of his songs. I like to say Year of the Cat and On the Border. It's a great record as well, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Brilliant. Wow, I didn't know this. This is interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So would you liken your...
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry. What do you put your longevity down to? Because you are the Rolling Stones of TV and radio presenters, aren't you? You really are.
Well, I've been around 48 years now, yes.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. That's not bad.
Yeah, it's a long time, yeah. I honestly don't know. I think being enthusiastic about what you do, loving what you do, but also coming to terms with the fact that we all get older and you've got to be able to move on. When I started, I was 21 years old when I was at Radio Caroline. Now, you can't be a 21-year-old forever, so you've got to change your act slightly. But also, you've got to be enthusiastic about what you do. And also, if you want to last, you've got to map out your own career. You can't just leave it to agents. Obviously, I've been very lucky. I had, when I first started, I had the best agent in the country, a guy called Harold Davison, who managed me, and he handled Frank Sinatra. And and people like that. And so when I came off the pirate ships, he said to me, I can make you the top disc jockey in the country in 3 months. And he did it in 2 months. And, so if you've got the right people behind you, and you've got the right, a whole group of people around you that are accountants are good to have, a good accountant, a good lawyer, and people like that. And I've still got the same people I had 48 years ago in accountancy. I haven't got my manager because he passed away recently. But I think structuring your career rather like building a house, it's got to be on good foundations. And also not let it go to your head. I saw 1 or 2 people around that I grew up with, and it completely went to their head. So when you go out, and as we were in those days, being a Radio 1 disc jockey, you'll remember, Pat, it was quite a big deal. And, you got mobbed by girls and things like that. But you've got to appreciate the fact that that is something that's not going to last forever. In my case, it obviously has. But but you've got to keep your feet on the ground, because you really can be replaced within 5 minutes. And it's the people that say, I can't be replaced, I'm irreplaceable, I'll last forever, and become awkward and divas. They won't last.
How did you keep your success going then? Because, you said people have got to change and adapt. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're pretty similar to what you've always been. You play pretty much the same game. It's always been the top game, and that's why you're at the top of your game. And you're now on Radio 2 doing perhaps the most listened to show they have. It's certainly the most listened back to on the iPlayer every single week. And, and that's after 48 years. So how can you say that, you were a massive star in 1967 doing a radio show that commands 2.5, maybe 3 times as many listeners as Chris Miles gets now? You're talking 20 million, maybe more people listening, and yet now in 2012 you're still doing the same thing. So I don't see how you could do that and do the same thing. You're still accepted.
Well, I think it's having ambition. I think giving yourself over to what you do. I've seen a lot of people who are not ambitious, and I think you've got to be driven slightly by what you want to do. I always wanted to be successful at what I did, and I wanted to try and be the best at what I could within your limitations. So it's knowing your limitations. I was brought up in an era where personality was the number one thing. If you had a personality, then that was a plus. Nowadays, unfortunately, in a lot of radio stations, not mentioning which ones, but personality is not the main thing. It's 3 in a row and a time check. And I've always said, that's monkey radio to me. A monkey can do that. You stick a monkey there, and 3 in a row and a time check to me is not DJing. Being DJing to me is a personality, and I came up in the era where personality was the main thing. And I've been very lucky in being able to be employed by people who, there are still 1 or 2 people around who appreciate that and want you to do it. Also, trying to work for the best station as well. That's always a plus. You can't always get in there. It took me 30 years to get to Radio 2. I didn't think I'd ever get there, but a lot of it is luck. A lot of it is luck, and a lot of it is pummeling away there. Also, somebody said to me, opening up Radio 1 and being the first voice on Radio 1, that was a career in itself, because nobody can take that away from you. When you suddenly become, who was the first person, in a pub quiz, who was the first person to open up Radio 1? Panel games on TV, and also what was the first record he played. So it's always, Tony Blackburn, January the 20s, I've forgotten what it was itself, 27th, I think it was, September the 27th, 1960.
September 30th.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, September. See, even I can't remember. I would fail that. September the 30th, 1967. It's the first time I've ever forgotten that, actually.
Yeah, and the move and Flowers in the Rain.
The Rain, yes.
Yeah. You see. I was only 6 and I was listening.
Well, that was a stroke. You must have been in your short trousers then.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm in my short trousers now because it's nice weather. Tony, when you mentioned the large audiences that you reached on Radio 1 and stuff, what about the audiences on the pirate ships? Because they were technically even more, weren't they?
Well, excuse me. Well, they were very big, yes. They weren't as big as obviously Radio 2 or Radio 1 now, because of course Radio Caroline South and Caroline North, we had the audience just in the south. But they made a massive impact. But if you take, when I opened up Radio 1 in '67, my audience to the breakfast show would have been between 17 and 20 million. Now, nobody's ever going to get that. So anybody coming along now, you've got to appreciate the fact to become well known is far more difficult, because not only if you go on the air, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to get 17 or 18 million listening to you, and if you go on the television, you're not going to get that amount of people watching you anymore. I mean, if you take Noel's House Party, that had 17 to 18 million audience, and Top of the Pops, of course, that had millions of people. So nowadays, with the multimedia that we have, it's more difficult to become a big name. And I don't think any of us could do it as big as that. There aren't many Ant and Decks around. There aren't many of these people.
Absolutely agree. Tell us the story for the people watching here at the Presenter Academy, because I'm sure they'll be very interested, as to how many people would wait for you at a London train station when you came on leave from the pirate ships and you came back to the mainland for a break for a week or so, how many people would know that you were coming to the train station and turn up?
Well, I used to drive actually, so
I thought there was a time when you turned up at a train station because you took the train for the coast, and there was something like I heard like 250,000 people waiting.
I did. There was a time at Liverpool Street Station when they found out we were coming back, and I was travelling by train, and there were a lot of people there for that. But I remember once I said, I'm going to give away records if you spot me in my, I had a little sports car. It was a little red sports car that I used to drive back to London with. And I said, if you can spot my car, wave to me and I'll give you a record. And I remember it took me, I think it was 3 hours to get out of Harwich. I'd run out of records by then because people were just lining the roads, which was incredible. But those days it was amazing. Yeah, I mean, whenever you came out of Radio 1, there were people waiting for you there, and things like that, and personal appearances. You'd have hundreds of people there. I remember opening up a store in Norwich where it was a glass front, and there were so many people there, the whole of the glass front went because, when I got out of the car, and I just went through the supermarket, went out the other side, and had to drive off because I wasn't allowed to stay there. And there was an incident in, I remember, I think it was Glasgow or somewhere in the north, in Scotland, where I was opening up a menswear store, and they dropped me off the wrong side of the road, and there were so many people there. The police guided me through, but somebody ripped my jacket. And when I came out, it was a menswear store. I came out with a better one than I went in with. But those days were incredible. Yes, you had to have police protection wherever you went for opening supermarkets and things like that, not just walking along the street. But it was everywhere you went, And if I wanted to, say, for instance, I had my own television show as well. I had a thing called Time for Blackburn on ITV. And if I, say, wanted to go into a fish and chip shop, I always waited till there weren't many people in there, because otherwise it would be, a crowd would gather. So those days were quite amazing.
So you were treated and were like a pop star, but then again, you were also making pop records, weren't you?
Yeah. Yes, we were. I think the early Radio 1 DJs, we were built up as pop stars, and we tended to last longer than a lot of the pop stars as well. So we were built up as pop stars. But I was also built up as a pop star because, as you say, I was making records, and I also had a publicist whose job was to get me in the newspapers as well. Not everybody had that, but I was built up as a pop star, yeah.
I can remember looking back at some of your openings, and I wonder if you can remember. This will show you how much people remember things about you. I was 15 years of age, and I was at a holiday camp in Hampshire, very near Bournemouth, where you're from. Yep. And you opened a sweet shop that was a massive, more than a sweet shop, kind of like a big Menzies equivalent.
Yes.
In Barton-on-Sea in Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And it came on the wall that day at the holiday camp that you were going to be there with a big poster. So we all went down to the town and walked in and waited for you. And there were so many people. I think I hardly even saw you. I just saw some police, and you got hustled in and you cut a ribbon and you left. But I remember the name of the sweet shop to this day.
I don't remember even being there.
Okay.
What was the name of the sweet shop?
It was 1976, so the long hot summer. I was 15, and it was called T.H. Sperring.
Sperring, I do remember that
and
name.
It was actually in New Milton.
New Milton, yes.
Yeah, there you go. New Milton, not Barton-on-Sea. I was staying at Barton-on-Sea, and we had to walk into New Milton to see you. And I remember I was going, because obviously at 15,
yeah.
I had the bug already for radio because I was obviously interested. What age did you get the bug for radio? Because you were, as I say, you were going down the singing route. When did it change?
I wanted to be a singer right from the word go. From the age of 4 or 5, I wanted to be in some branch of show business. But I used to listen to Radio Luxembourg in the old days, and I heard people like Pete Murray and Alan Freeman and people like that. And I thought this would be a great way to earn a living. And it really fascinated me. And I had a big gramophone at home, and I used to play records to my mum and dad at home. I linked up some speakers up there. But I remember going to college, driving to Bournemouth College, and listening to the All Light programme and thinking it's got to get better than this, because it was so old-fashioned, and the Northern Dance Orchestra and things like that. And I just thought I'd love to be a DJ and be able to talk a load of nonsense on the radio and play great music. And so right from the word go, I suppose, I wanted to do something like that. But the DJing I really wanted to use to get into records, because it was very difficult to get into the record business.